and welcome back to another episode of Marissa Unfiltered, a podcast with me, Marissa. I'm currently home alone right now, and I just heard the biggest clang, like something fell or like whatever. And yeah, so if this episode does not air, it's because I was murdered in my own home. I don't know if that's dramatic or not, but like I'm literally sitting here. I was like, oh, let me go check, see what the hell that noise was. But then I remembered that I shouldn't do that. So I'm low-key being silly, low-key being like 100% real. Anyways, hi sugar tits, welcome to episode 6 of this fever dream that is my life. How's everybody doing? Are we having a good week? We just had a bank holiday in the UK and I did absolutely nothing. Actually, I did less than nothing. I procrastinated for 2 days when I should have been doing research, and yeah, I just ended up watching just random clips on YouTube, and so I tried playing a bit of Animal Crossing, but it really annoys me. I'll talk about Animal Crossing in a second, but I tried to play a little bit of Animal Crossing. Mostly I just procrastinated. I find life to be very disappointing in that I have to keep doing things. Like, I can't just do something once and then that's it. I never have to do it again. Like, if I wash my hair, I have to keep washing my hair. And if I cook, I have to cook again tomorrow. And it's just like really exhausting. So that's kind of where I am right now. Okay. What the fuck? I should probably just go. Nah, it's fine. I'm not gonna go see what's going on downstairs. I'm just gonna go straight into the news. Let's see what's been happening. So I said there was a bank holiday. There was the coronation of King Charles over the weekend. And it went as I expected. I didn't actually tune in. I got the gist of what was going on from Twitter. And so anything that I say, please take it with a grain of salt, because I didn't actually watch it. I just I read what was going on and I saw clips of what was going on Twitter, because I didn't really care. I don't care about the royals, so I'm not going to waste my time absorbing any information about them unless I absolutely have to. But apparently little Charlie was a bit pissy. He was a pissy little baby at one point because he had to wait a bit too long to go into the venue before they crowned him, and he was caught on tape saying, what was he saying? He was like, oh, we're never on time, we're always late. And yeah, I guess his fingers were really hurting, so he just wanted to be at home. That happened. Twitter was having a field day with the outfits that the royals wore. A lot of people said they looked like they were cosplaying, and that the outfits looked like trash, which I'm not surprised by. A lot of people were talking about Chaz's fingers, like I mentioned before. And yes, I'm going to keep giving him nicknames because I don't give a shit. I don't respect them. But they were talking about his sausage fingers, and there were so many memes about his little sausage fingers. And I swear his hands are that's a sign. He has like incredibly swollen red fingers, and they do look like raw sausages. And I could have sworn that that's a sign of some kind of health condition. Do you know what? Let me just Google it, because like this is getting like I could have sworn it's a medical condition. Why did I Google it? Well, they said arthritis, which I'm gonna be real. It doesn't look like arthritis, but I don't know. Let me go on NHS, see what they have to say. It's okay. It's edema, and I think swelling in the arms or hands, aka edema, and apparently it goes away on its own. What can it be caused by? I don't think this is what I'm not gonna try. Oh, this is it. Kidney, something to do with something wrong with your kidneys, your liver, or your heart. I'm not trying to diagnose this man, but I just knew, like, I've seen a lot of places, like, whenever they talk about his swollen fingers, they always talk about, like, sometimes they talk about how, like, that could be a sign of a serious health condition. And it's apparently something, it could be something in the kidneys, liver, or heart. But either way, it's very unsightly. And I think he's actually really self-conscious about it, because there's been a lot of pictures with him like putting his fingers in his pockets or whatever the case is. And you won't catch me feeling bad about any of them. They've definitely got enough money to sort whatever the issue is that he's dealing with. So yeah, speaking of the coronation though, on the last episode, I mentioned that the Met Police were flexing their authoritarian muscles, and that they did, Hans. They basically arrested a bunch of protesters at the coronation. They weren't even doing anything. They were just there, and they got arrested before anything even happened. And the police seized a truck. Not a truck. Why? I'm not American. Why am I saying truck? A van. A transit van. They seized a transit van that was filled with... what's that word? What am I... Why did I write notes if I'm not going to actually read what the notes say? So the police basically seized a van filled with placards that say that said "Not My King" on them. And they started like putting out statements about how like the protesters had Molotov cocktails, and that they were going to use rape alarms to disturb the procession, and all of this weird shit that a lot of people were questioning whether or not any of that actually happened. They did show pictures of the placards, but everything else, like the rape alarms and all of that other stuff, it's not really clear on whether that actually happened or not. And also beforehand, I literally read the statement on the last episode. I read the tweet where they said, I'm gonna pull it up. Oh, why have I got that in my... I bookmarked some really weird shit on Twitter. So on the 3rd of May, they said, our tolerance for any disruption, whether through protest or otherwise, will be low. We will deal robustly with anyone intent on undermining this celebration. And then a few days later, so yesterday, they tweeted again, because people were fucking outraged that they were arresting people. Just like, you should be able to, like, oppose something. And I don't think these people were intending to like cause a massive disrupt. Like, they weren't intending to run into Westminster Abbey and shout in Charles's face saying, "You're not my king." Like, I don't think that's what they were planning on doing. And it just feels very... against freedom of speech, in my personal opinion. But that's what the government are all about these days. So yesterday they tweeted, "It was not our intention to prevent." Why can't I read already? This is going to be a hot fucking mess. "It's not our intention to prevent protests. It's very clear a number of protests took place across the footprint before, during, and after the event with no police intervention. Any suggestion all protest was prohibited is not correct." So even their own words of their tolerance of protests not being accepted, I guess, is incorrect. And then they like go on to say that they've investigated and 4 people have been charged, and they arrested a shit ton of people. It was just a shit show. Like, they kept putting out all of these statements and people kept like questioning them because, babes, in your own words, you said that you're not going to tolerate any protests. So you coming out afterwards and being like, yeah, we're so sorry. At one point they were like, "We're so sorry that we arrested these people." And it's like, no, you're not sorry. That's exactly what you were intending on doing all along. You said that. And the Met is basically just an extension of the state, of the government at this point. And they literally are just doing all of this stuff to suppress protests, whether you're protesting, for climate change, for, civil rights and human rights violations, you're protesting in support of refugees. They don't give a shit. They will literally stop everybody because that's what the government wants. And even Sarah Everard, when women were protesting that, they went and made a big stink of it and arrested people. It's just going to get worse and worse, and we are basically in a fascist state in the UK, and you cannot convince me otherwise. You actually can't convince me otherwise. They had the fucking nerve, the audacity, the unmitigated gall to tweet that they regretted having to arrest any protesters, even though they said that they were going to have no tolerance for protesters. Anyways, the Mayor of London spoke out and he said that the Met needs to look into what's going on because people want lessons to be learned from this, which is so fucking soft in my personal opinion. But I guess, I actually used to really like Sadiq Khan, but now I don't know. I feel like a lot of politicians, after a while, even there's very few who remain as radical as they did when they first enter office. And that's why I think that there should be terms, like shorter terms, on serving public office. But anyways, speaking of hot messes, in future I'm gonna talk less about politics in this thing because it just enrages me, and I don't want to be enraged. I want to have fun. But I have to talk about this because this video is so fucking disgusting. The FBI released a video. At least in the video, it says FBI. So, me doing my little deductive reasoning, I can only glean from that the FBI is behind the video. I don't know what they were trying to do with it, but it's gross. It's absolutely gross. I'm gonna try to do my best to describe this video for you. They released it a couple of days ago, and let me just describe it and then we'll go from there. So basically, in the beginning of the video, I kind of got SNL vibes from it in terms of like the quality. It just felt like the start of a Saturday Night Live video in my opinion. So it starts with a couple. They're sitting like in a bar or a restaurant, and they're about to order. And the waitress comes up, and they're like, "Oh, are you ready to order?" And the guy's like, "No, I need to take this phone call." So he steps away, and he's standing at the bar taking a phone call. And then you see the waitress, like she's going around to other people, and the lady in the couple, she's just sitting there like looking at the menu or whatever. Shortly after, it's focused on the guy at the bar, and you can hear commotion going on off screen, and it's like, what the hell's going on here? And the commotion gets louder and closer, and then you start to hear gunshots. And it just like, it's so confusing because, again, there's no context or lead up to like what's going on. But what they're depicting in this video is an active shooter situation. In the commotion, people are panicking, and they show people escaping via like fire exits. People are hiding under tables, behind the bar, and some people even barricade themselves in what looks like an office. And again, I feel like as I'm describing this, it sounds like a movie, but it is not a movie. It's scripted content, but it's supposed to depict a real life situation. Then there's a voiceover, and it's explaining what you should and shouldn't do during an active shooter situation. And now it just feels like propaganda, if you ask me. One of the nuggets of advice in this fucking tone deaf, tasteless piece of shit video suggests teaming up with other people to fight off the attacker. Bearing in mind, most, if not all, mass shootings in the US they use automatic rifles, or rifles that have been modified to become semi-automatic weapons. So if this video is telling people that they should team up to try and surprise an attacker who's aiming an automatic weapon at them, a rifle, which is also a large caliber weapon, which could do a lot of damage, and a lot of the most deadly, gruesome shootings that have happened in America, there were large caliber rifles. And I believe in one of the school shootings that happened, there was the children were unrecognizable because of how much damage the weapon did. So they're telling people to attack someone who has a weapon that can easily kill them. Also, their aim is usually to kill as many people as possible. And this fucking video is suggesting that normal, everyday, random people, someone who's working in an office building or a librarian, should team up to attack this person in order to save their lives. When I tell you that video gave me the biggest chill down my spine, one of the reasons being because there was literally just a mass shooting over the weekend where a lot of people lost their lives, including there's this one picture that's going around social media at the moment of this family where everybody except the one child died. And it was just his birthday, and I haven't looked into whether or not that's real. There's like news outlets reporting this, so I'm assuming that it's real. But it just, the timing of it, and the thing is, there's no perfect timing to release something like this because it's absolute bullshit and it should never have been released. But the timing, and also in terms of timing, there's literally always a fucking mass shooting, so there's no perfect timing. But it's so, I saw that video, I'm like, what the hell is this? And literally everybody else on Twitter and wherever else I saw the video, it's just like, is this real? Is this the point that we're at now, where instead of banning guns or, like legislating to, suppress the sales of guns. They're just saying, oh, if you get caught in this situation, you either run, hide, or fight, and you're on your own, babes. You can team up with other people, but just in general, you're going to be on your own because we're not going to do anything to help. And the most accurate depiction in the video was, at some point, some people escape out of the fire exit and there's police outside. And so someone must have called the police. So they're going in, and at no point in the video until the very end, when basically at one point the people must have subdued the shooter, and after the shooter was subdued, that's when the police come in to like scope out what's going on. And I thought that was the most accurate depiction of police, because literally in that one school shooting in Texas, they just hid and waited outside while children were screaming and dying inside. So, I just felt like it was a very accurate depiction. And just, yeah, those are my thoughts, really. Like, I don't understand why they're still not legislating and trying to prevent gun violence. They're basically just blaming the victim now. And it's at a point where, I don't remember who said it, and I think it was after Sandy Hook, which was like so long ago now. Someone basically said, like, if they were okay with killing children, they'll be okay with everyone else dying. So if they didn't legislate after children were dying, then they're not gonna feel, the pressure to do anything. And even in the case of Sandy Hook, politicians and these fucking stupid commentators were demonizing the family members. And Alex Jones, a couple of months ago, or I think it was at some point last year, basically lost a defamation case against the parents from the Sandy Hook kids who died, because he kept saying that they were actors and like they're crisis actors and all of this random stuff that isn't true. Like these people, these parents lost their children, and for years, for almost a decade, Alex Jones villainized them. And he lost like a huge defamation case and had to file for bankruptcy, which he basically did in order to not pay them because it was so much money. But I don't think that I've lost faith in humanity a little bit, and I don't feel like anything's ever going to change. The same way in the UK, things are just going to keep getting worse and worse with the police suppressing freedom of speech and all of that stuff. I just think it's going downhill, and the politicians there's no opposition, there's no like actual opposition who's fighting for the rights of the everyday people. And I just find that really sickening, which is probably why I'm gonna stop talking about politics, because I don't have many good things to say. I just, like, as a whole, if I never step foot in America ever again, it actually wouldn't bother me. I remember the last time I was there, it was 2019, and we went to Florida. I was visiting family and we went to Florida, and there was some points when we were out in public that I was so nervous to just like be outside in a large group of people, because I was hyper vigilant and just really afraid that something was going to happen. And I don't like that feeling. Like, I don't want to go anywhere that makes me feel like that. So I'm in no rush to go. I really wanted to go after the pandemic and everything, I was like, oh, I would really love to go and visit family again because I really enjoyed that trip. But I don't know. I don't know. It's not somewhere that it's on my bucket list anymore. And the places in the US that I want to go to, like Hawaii, they don't really want people to go there. So like native Hawaiians don't want people to visit. So yeah, that along with also the random thing that's been sweeping across the US, it's just random people shooting their neighbors or strangers for no apparent reason. There's been a couple of cases. There was that one old man who shot the boy on his porch, like just shot him through the door because they're saying that Fox News radicalized him into thinking that like all black people are scary or whatever the hell his reasoning was. But he shot this this teenage boy who was the guy. He wanted to get help. He was literally trying to get help and knocked on this guy's door, and without even asking who's there or anything like that, he just grabbed his gun and started shooting. There was another case where a man shot a girl. How old was she? I need to find this because it's so insane. Man shoots his neighbor. It's literally when there's so many stories. There are so many. 3 dead in Pennsylvania. Neighbors. 3 Pennsylvania neighbors dead after fight over snow. 5 dead in Texas. Execution stuff. What the fuck? I think that was the mass shooting that happened recently. Yes. And then there's this other one. A Texas man accused of killing five people. He killed 5 people over a noise dispute. When I read stuff like this, it makes me never want to talk to my neighbors. Like, it makes me just want to mind my own fucking business and just not even make eye contact, because I don't want to, spook someone or make them think that, oh, she's like mean mugging me or whatever. Like, let me stay in my house where I'm safe, because these stories are insane. There's the other one. I can't find the one where basically a man shot a little girl in the head because she was like, they were playing hide and seek, and he said that he heard commotion outside and got scared and shot a little girl in the head because she was like on his property. And that to me is just, yeah, so that's been happening a lot. I'm just gonna X out of that browser because that's some scary shit. So yeah, there's been a lot of that stuff happening, and so it makes me very afraid to go to America. I'm also afraid to go to Canning Town, East London after dark. So I'm joking. Canning Town is not that scary. It's not a scary place. And they have really good bubble tea, and it's been gentrified, so it's not as scary as it used to be. Anyways, in more fun news, Nintendo recently confirmed their release or the release windows for upcoming games, and I mentioned earlier that I was playing Animal Crossing. So, and I'm kind of looking forward to some of these. So, Zelda, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is coming out on the 12th of May. Pikmin 4 on the 21st of July. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, The Hidden Treasures of Area Zero, Part 1. That is a long fucking title. Part 1 in fall of 2023 and Part 2 in winter of 2023. Mario Kart Deluxe 8 or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The Booster Course Pass Wave 5 and 6 are coming out in sometime in 2023, and Metroid Prime 4 is TBA. Why did I put it in here if it's TBA? I'm mainly looking forward to Mario Kart and Pikmin, even though I still haven't finished Pikmin 3 due to the trauma of losing so many Pikmin. I literally, it's been over a year. It's been over a year. I play with my sister because when I play by myself, I give up really quickly. So I play with my sister on Switch, and I just gave up. It was one very hot day in the summer, and we were really close to like the final boss, but so many Pikmin kept dying, and I was just like, no, I can't do this because they're so adorable. They're so cute. The red ones, oh, they're so cute. So I had to give up, and yeah, I think I'm gonna finish it though. I'll push through at some point before July and try to finish it so that I can play the new one with a fresh, clean slate and start the violence all over again of killing Pikmin. Again, like I said earlier, I'm upset about Animal Crossing New Horizons not being updated, and they have no plans to update it ever. And that just makes me really pissed off. And I don't know what Nintendo's doing. Like, why would you do that? That's like one of their biggest games. So many people love it. I love it. To be honest with you, I got a Switch because of Animal Crossing New Horizons. One of the podcasts I listened to during the pandemic, they mentioned that they were playing Animal Crossing and how cute it was and blah blah blah. And so I got a Switch so I can play, and I waited ages to get the grey Switch. Not the Switch Lite, the actual Switch with the dock and everything. And then they don't update it anymore, and that's just really annoying. Anyways, I think also Mortal Kombat is coming out at some point. I read somewhere that they're coming out with MK12, I think it will be, but don't quote me on that. I may have just dreamt that up because I finally, after a very long time, I think this is like the second time that I beat Chronica. The first time I beat Chronica was on easy mode, and then I was like, okay, maybe I should try. And it took me, I think it was like 5 days, and I spent at least 3 hours each day trying to beat her. But yeah, anyways, that's enough of that. Let's talk about the most cursed live stream in history. The story of Nasubi. Before we get going, I would like to formally apologize to the nation of Japan for how I'm about to butcher these pronunciations of people's names and places. I'm so sorry. I like Japan, even to the point where at one point I was learning the language because I wanted to move there, and also just in order to consume the TV shows and movies and all of that stuff without a language barrier, because sometimes it can be really hard to find certain shows and things translated. But it's been ages. It's been like 3 or 4 years since I've actually practiced. So my pronunciation is dog shit. There's a few words that I still know the meaning of, but that's about it. What if I told you that a Japanese TV network tortured a man on live television for 15 months straight? Would you believe me? Well, hun, they absolutely did that, and I'm here to tell you all about it. I used to love watching Japanese game shows. They have some really great ones. Honestly, I used to watch clips on YouTube back in the day, and that's actually where my whole fascination and love of Japan came from. I don't know like where it started, but like I'd watch clips from some of the game shows that I'll mention later on, and it just like really fascinated me. And also I was a little bit into anime, and I really like Japanese food, so like I was just like in a zone of consuming a lot of Japanese content. Japanese and other Asian countries have influenced a lot of game shows, reality TV competition shows, and movies in the West. The Masked Singer, Hole in the Wall, and Is It Cake? I think that's what it's called on Netflix. are just a few. Basically, some of the reality TV shows that you've seen on Netflix and other places were probably made for an Asian audience before Netflix or other TV networks adopted it. I know Hole in the Wall used to be on UK TV, I want to say around in the mid 2000s. No, the like mid 2000s to around the 2010s. And then obviously the Masked Singer is really popular right now in the US, and Ken Jeong, who appeared on the original, kind of produced the American version as well. And then Is It Cake, I believe, is taken from, there was this Japanese game show where they're in a room, like they put them in this, I don't think it was a whole game show, it was just like a segment on a variety show. They put people in this room and people have to guess if different objects are made from chocolate, and obviously they kind of just changed that into cake. And then I remember during the pandemic there was this whole obsession with making like super realistic cakes as well. That's the kind of inspiration for Is It Cake, I think. But I genuinely think Netflix just saw that Japanese game show and was like, yeah, let's just change it, let's make it cake instead of chocolate, and let's go from there. And basically in the game show there's this one scene where the guy's like, oh, it's a shoe, and it's like a men's formal shoe, and he has to guess whether or not it's cake before they make him taste it. And there was a doorknob and other things as well, so they make them bite them in order to see whether it's candy or not. Some of my favorite Japanese game shows, I'm gonna list a couple of my favorites, if you will allow me, because they're really good. Some of them are really good. I might eat my words later by the end of this, but some of them are incredibly entertaining. So there's one called Darrow. It's basically, it's psychotic. The contestants are put in precarious situations while being expected to answer questions and solve puzzles to win prizes. And this is generally a theme that you'll see time and time again, is like someone's put in a really uncomfortable or embarrassing or just downright deadly situation, and they have to answer rapid fire questions or solve a puzzle or something like that. In Darrow, there's this one setup where the contestants have to stand on a plank of wood, and some of them there's 2 people on the plank of wood, some of them there's about 4. And so when they enter the room has a floor. That's how they can walk into the room. And then there's these planks of wood, and they're told, okay, you have to step on them before we can start the round. And then slowly the floor starts to disappear. So it's like this chaotic thing where they're like basically scrambling to stand on one of the planks, and the longer ones will have multiple people standing on them. The other thing is that the planks are getting shorter as they are asked more and more questions. If they get a question wrong, the plank becomes shorter. So there's also that added element of it. So they have to answer questions or, solve puzzles and stuff like that. And I guess it kind of shows the masochist that lives within me and millions of people who watch these shows, because the sheer panic as they try to answer these questions while holding on to the ground that's beneath them as it's slowly disappearing. When they fail, it's so funny because it's actually really funny, because at one point they'll just be standing on the plank and it's getting shorter and you can see them panicking more and more to the point where they're not able to stand on it anymore. And so they fall, and the shot of I'm gonna try and link clips from some of these if I can, but the pit below, it looks like a pit that they're falling into. There's just like bottomless, and as these people are falling, they make it so dramatic with the special effects and stuff. And they make it seem like these people have just fallen to their deaths. And it's so funny. I feel so bad. But it's so funny. Another one is All Star Thanksgiving. If you've seen clips of people in leotards, this is going to be hard to get through because some of this is actually kind of funny. If you've seen clips of people in leotards trying to climb stairs while covered in what I can only assume is a sea of KY jelly, it's from this show. So people are on different teams and they're wearing different coloured like spandex leotards with helmets, and they're trying to climb to the top of this massive staircase, except there's like this constant stream of lube, I'm guessing, or some kind of viscous material coming from the top. So they have to climb it like super slowly, and any slight movement can cause everyone to topple to the bottom, and then they have to start again. And that's kind of the comedy of it, I guess. Like, some people get really close to the top and they have to like hit a button or ring a bell, and some of them will get really close but then they'll trip and they have to do it all again. And sometimes I just watch that just to give myself some amusement. And it's kind of like Sisyphus in a way, like he pushes the boulder all the way to the top of the hill just for it to roll down again, except not as tragic as Sisyphus, I guess. There's also my favorite, Gaki no Tsukai. This show introduced me to the Downtown Duo, a famous comedian duo consisting of Hitoshi Matsumoto and Masatoshi Hamada. And they themselves are really funny and I like their comedy. But the show actually is what inspired me to learn Japanese, and it made me more curious about Japanese culture. But with most TV shows, it's like a hyper realistic version of what society is actually like, I guess. This is one of the few ones where you can actually find a lot of English translated clips and even full episodes on YouTube. So I would suggest checking it out. It's a variety show format. They have like loads of different segments, and they'll do some stand up in there. They'll get the audience involved at some points, and they are famous for their batsu or punishment games, where the loser has to endure some form of really bizarre, embarrassing, painful punishments. Some of their more popular games include the Silent Library and other variations of the Try Not to Laugh challenge. I feel like they were the ones who really, they brought it into the fore, basically. Yeah, so I think it was WWE who actually, they would back when they used to do the more dramatic storytelling, when they had a lot of scripted things, they also did like the Silent Library challenge. And yeah, people get beat up or they have to do like really embarrassing things if they laugh. So basically, in these challenges, the contestants are put in increasingly ridiculous situations, or really stupid things are happening in front of them and they're expected not to laugh. What I love about this show is that they were indiscriminate about the punishment. So even the stars of the show, they would also be subjected to and they would actually endure some of the worst punishments. I think there was this one where one of them was he was scared of needles, and so his punishment was to endure acupuncture, but the guy who was performing the acupuncture was just like really heavy-handed, and then they did like electrolyzed acupuncture. The whole thing was that he wasn't supposed to respond to the stimulus of pain that he was experiencing, or he would be punished. But it's funny, I promise. It sounds very sad, but it's funny. The most famous, I think, is Takeshi's Castle. I actually didn't really watch Takeshi's Castle growing up. It wasn't until like later on when I watched it. It's, to me, in the beginning, it kind of sounded like some kind of endurance challenge thing. And in a way, I guess it was. but it's literally one of the most popular game shows, and not just in Japan. It was popular in the US, and it was so popular that it was dubbed for British and American audiences. It debuted back in 1986, and it had like a really limited run as well. But I guess it was so brilliant that a lot of people would just watch reruns all the time. And it was hosted by professional badass Takeshi Kitano, who's an actor and a director, most famous for, well, to me, most famous to me for Battle Royale, which is an amazing, wonderful Japanese movie. I watched it on Prime recently. I think Takeshi's Castle paved the way for shows like Total Wipeout, or Wipeout as it's known in the US. I couldn't tell if some of these shows were still on air, but I do know for a fact that Gaki no Tsukai absolutely is, and I'm probably going to watch some clips after this. You may have gathered from these shows that punishment or embarrassment is a big element of, that's a big part of the fun. The joke is usually in the way the contestants respond to being in a precarious or embarrassing situation. The show that I want to talk about today is no different. Let's take a trip back to 1998. Ace of Base was on the radio. I saw the sign, baby. I was obsessed with Ace of Base. I think that's what made me an emo, if I'm being completely honest. So they were on the radio, and The Truman Show was in theatres, which is quite apt because the show that I'm going to talk about was described as a real-life Truman Show in some ways. I think it was a little bit more despicable in my opinion, but we'll get into it. The show was called Susunu Denpa Shonen, or Do Not Proceed Crazy Youth. Had several seasons, but we are going to talk about the season that aired in 1998. It actually started in 1992, and the season that I'm going to talk about featured someone called Nasubi. Before I give you the background on Nasubi, I'll give you a little rundown on the show. I couldn't really get any concrete information. Some sites say that it ran from 1992 to 1998, and others said 1998 to 2002. I think, from what I gather, the show was around from 1992, but the seasons with Nasubi ran from 98 to 2002. His season was initially supposed to be just one season, but it was so popular that they extended it. And they probably would have keep extending it if the light didn't drain from this guy's eyes by the end. The show's not too different from some of the other game shows that I mentioned earlier. The aim of the game is to endure increasingly ridiculous, painful, embarrassing situations. And I guess the entertainment is how the contestants react to what's happening to them. And sometimes it's not even about how they react. It's about the audience watching what they find funny about the situation, and most of the times it seems like they just find it funny that it's not them that's happening to. Apparently there was this one segment on one of the seasons where they tested the loyalty of fans of a baseball team. Basically they locked these people in a room with a TV where they could watch their favorite team's baseball games. And that kind of sounds nice, right? You know, they're bringing fans together to support their favorite team. It sounds really delightful and sweet. Well, that may seem sweet, but it's not very entertaining, is it? That's what the producers thought anyways. So the challenge was that if the contestants' favourite team won a game, they would be rewarded with food. But if the team lost, the contestant wouldn't get any food. And the producers would turn the lights out, leaving the contestants sat alone in the dark room without any food until the next day or the next time the team played. And this is kind of foreshadowing for what happens to Nasubi. With some of the other shows I mentioned, like Darrow, although these people look like they're in a dangerous situation, it's obvious to any person, any thinking person, that they're not going to let these people fall to their deaths, even though they make it look like that's what's happening. With these types of shows, where the punishment is starvation, it's unclear whether they actually allow these people to have comfort breaks or to get food and other things, or if they're just literally locking them in the room without anything. There was a season where 2 comedians had to hitchhike from South Africa to Norway, but they weren't allowed to use any travel money, so they had to rely on the goodwill of strangers. This sometimes left them with little food or in harsh elements, and one of the contestants even collapsed and had to be airlifted to hospital, which makes me think that they don't actually help these people behind the scenes. Or if they do, it's not that much. Ethically speaking, it's fucking batshit crazy to subject human beings to this kind of situation for the sake of entertainment. But I don't think these people care that much about ethics. If all of that sounds crazy, Nasubi's case is arguably worse. Now, Nasubi is actually a nickname and it means eggplant in Japanese. And this nickname was given to Tomoaki Hamatsu, and we'll talk about why he was given this nickname. But first, I tried to find more information about Tomoaki, like what was his childhood like, you know, what was his favorite color, all of that stuff. But there was very little in terms of his life before this show. But what we do know is that he really wanted to be a famous comedian in Japan, even though his father, who was a police officer, didn't agree with his career choice. He said that he had to do a lot to convince his dad to let him pursue his dream, and eventually his dad was like, okay, whatever, just don't strip in public. That's the one thing. You can be a comedian if you really want to, but don't get booty butt naked in public. Please, son, please. He would soon disappoint his dad, but that would be the least of his worries. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything more about him personally. In 1998, he won a sort of lottery where the prize was to appear in a show business related role. It's important to note that he was never told what this role would be, and he was kept in the dark throughout his stint on this show. So he wins, and as you can imagine, he's really excited because now he has his foot in the door. He finally has the opportunity to appear on TV. He's well on his way to becoming a famous comedian. The job in question is a challenge where he is placed in a room where they made him take his clothes off. That's the first thing they do. As soon as he enters the room, they're like, strip. And to add to the level of embarrassment and inadvertently basically contributed to him disappointing his dad, they put that shit on TV. The room is empty as fuck, by the way. Actually, that's not entirely true. Okay, there was a coffee table in the room, but apart from the coffee table and a tatami mat for him to sleep on, which is basically like a straw mat, the room was empty. And he had some magazines, so I guess, you know. They then explained to him that he must earn everything he needs to survive, including food and entertainment and clothes, by entering the sweepstakes found in the magazines they gave him. Not only that, but he had to earn a minimum of 1 million yen, which is equivalent to around £5,800 or $7,300 worth of prizes before they could let him out. Side note, since I'm revealing a lot about myself today, I guess I'll reveal a little bit more. I remember when we were kids, me and my sister used to try to enter sweepstakes in magazines to try and win toys and games, but we literally never won anything. And I think, if I'm being realistic, that's when I became a villain and a pessimist. Because I could never understand why we never won anything. Like, we would try to, you know, there were the ones in magazines where you could send them money and they'll send you a gift, you know, like a t-shirt. Or there was this one with a radio. It was like a karaoke radio, and I really wanted that fucking radio. And when my sister listens to this, if she listens, she's gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I really wanted that radio and I never got it. And that's when I realized that life will always disappoint you. Anyways, back to Tomoaki, sorry. He was cut off from all outside contact, and the only person he spoke to was the delivery person who brought him the prizes. Except there were not full-on conversations. The delivery person was clearly instructed not to speak to him past what was absolutely necessary. The producers would also speak to him occasionally, but they were essentially he was put in solitary confinement for people's entertainment. No one would really talk to him. He couldn't contact his family or friends. He had no contact with the outside world whatsoever. This sounds like nightmare fuel to me, but this was Tomoako's reality for 15 months. Because he wasn't allowed any clothes unless he won them in the sweepstakes, they had to cover his genitals with an eggplant emoji, which is where he got the nickname. Nasubi means eggplant in Japanese. I'm going to try my best to keep calling him Tomoaki because I don't know, like, he's done interviews where he's like, you know, he's not trying to shy away from all of this. He does say it's traumatizing and whatever, but I just feel like I prefer to call him by his actual name than to call him this, like, really traumatizing thing that happened to him. So, yeah. The other absolutely nutty thing about this show is that he was under the impression that the show would be edited down before broadcasted on TV. And you can even see this in clips where he's summarizing how he spent his day or what he achieved so far in terms of the prizes that he's won. So he's doing this thinking that, oh, they're gonna take all these recordings and they're gonna edit them down to take out all the boring parts, and they're just gonna leave the lively parts in. That's not what happened. The producers never told him that he would be live streamed around the clock for the entire country to see. So there's all kinds of questions here about informed consent. I doubt he knew how long he would have been subjected to that situation as well. Like, I don't think he knew. I've seen some people describe it as him being kidnapped, and although I don't think that's the case, I know for a fact there's no way that he could have fully consented to what happened to him. Not in an informed way anyways. When they were explaining the rules to him, he even seemed incredulous, almost as if he didn't believe that they were going to do that. And he said himself that he thought that they were taking the videotapes because they made him, there was a camera set up in the room and they made him replenish these like VHS tapes like every couple of hours. He thought that they were taking those videotapes so that they could edit it one day and make it into a show. All of this suggests that he did not fully understand what was going on. Before long, he was entering hundreds of competitions a day in order to win the bare necessities he needed to survive. I'm sure the first thing on his mind was food. I know, like, literally any situation I'm in, the first thing I'm thinking about is, what is there to eat? If someone wants me to go out somewhere, okay, what are we gonna eat? My friend wants me to go to her house. Do you have food in your house, bitch? No, I'm not coming. Food is literally always the first thing on my mind. The only problem here is that it obviously took time, 2 weeks to be exact, for the prizes to come, since he had to mail them in. So he had these like postcards and little things that he had to mail in physically, wait for them to receive them, process them, and then send him the prizes. In the meantime, he had no food. He said that the producers would give him a little bread and like little bits of bread and water to keep him alive, but that all stopped when the prizes started rolling in. I need you to understand, this isn't extreme couponing where those women could find coupons for any and everything in a magazine or newspaper. This isn't a show on TLC. TLC would probably be sued if they did shit like this. Some of the prizes were just random as fuck. Like in Extreme Couponing, which was a show back in the day, these ladies could find literally anything. They can go through magazines and newspapers and find a coupon or like sweepstakes for literally anything. And they could do their entire shop. There's videos on YouTube of it. They can do their entire like $100 plus shop and end up paying like something ridiculous like $5. That isn't this. He's basically just entering random competitions to win random prizes, and he has to use those to survive. And then there's this point system as well, where the worth of the prize will go towards this 1 million yen goal that he has to reach. So let's talk about some of the things he won. One of the first things he won were a few boxes, like juice boxes. They were like juicy soft drink things in a box. Next, he won a huge bag of plain rice. And he was so happy with this prize, especially. It was maybe like the second or third thing that he won. But it seemed like even when he was winning, he was losing. Because although he had the rice, he had nothing to cook it in. He had no pots. And all he had was a gas burner. Like a single gas, like a camping stove, basically. At one point, he came up with a plan to soak the rice overnight, hoping that it would be soft enough to eat the next day, but it wasn't. He then recycled one of the drink containers from a previous prize by soaking the rice in it, putting water in it, and leaving it overnight, hoping that that would do something. And he left it close to the burner, close enough to where it would get warm, but not to where it would obviously like burn and melt the container. And that worked better for him, and he could actually eat the rice. It was kind of like a porridgey, congealed situation. But keep in mind that he's still eating plain rice. But he described it as delicious rice because before that he just had bits of bread and water. It just shows how hungry he must have been. He also won pork cutlets, but again had nothing to cook it in. And I believe this is one of the things he ate raw out of desperation, which is crazy because I'm sure you can get like tapeworm and stuff from raw pork. I'm sure you can get tapeworm and other parasites from eating raw pork, which is why it's recommended to not do that. But he was so desperate. Before this, he had some other meat as well, and he tried to cook it. So he had a cut of steak, basically, and he tried to cook it over the burner by using a ballpoint pen to hold it over the flame so he doesn't burn his hand. But this didn't work really well, and I think he also ate that raw or like semi-cooked. The only item of clothing he won was a pair of used women's underwear, which is disgusting as fuck. And it's also fucking sus. How is that the only item of clothing he won? Like literally over the course of the competition, that is the only item of clothing. Oh, and they couldn't fit him either. So he ended up with this dirty pair of women's knickers as opposed to men's knickers. He ended up with this dirty pair of knickers that he couldn't do anything with. So he just went naked the entire time for the 15-month run. He didn't even have a blanket or anything. So in some of the shots, you can see him waking up in the morning and his bed is just a tatami mat. There's nothing covering him. He doesn't have a sheet or anything. And that to me Oh, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I need something to protect me from the monsters. At some point, he won a TV with no antenna, a PlayStation console without any games, and then subsequently he won a controller for the PlayStation and eventually a game. And after he won the game, he spent the next few days sitting in front of the TV playing it, because up until this point he had no simulation stimulation whatsoever. He had no one to talk to and nothing to occupy his mind. He even ate dog food at one point because that's all he wanted at the time and he was starving. And he described the dog food as disgusting. He also won things like a bike, which he turned into a stationary bike for some exercise, and Spice Girl tickets, which I bet he wished they were actually spices. Am I right, girls? Spice up that rice. Oh my gosh, this poor guy. At the time, Japan was experiencing an economic downturn, so the sweepstakes and coupons were actually quite popular. So I guess that added to the fascination, which resulted in over 16 million people watching Tomoaki weekly. This show was so popular in Japan that Tomoaki had to be moved several times because people would find out where he was staying and they would try to get in. Instead of telling him what was happening, the producers would lie to him and told him that they were moving to increase his luck. They invoked some kind of feng shui. They were like, dude, the vibes in this apartment is ridiculous. So we're just going to move you, okay? It's not because some stalker found out where you live, wink, wink. They'd basically just blindfold him and put him in a car and take him to a new location where it would be set up exactly like his last place. And they did this several times. When he was moved, he seemed so happy to be leaving, but he couldn't even see anything because he was just blindfolded and bundled into the back of a van. And he wasn't allowed to speak to anyone, not even the producers. And the other thing is, as soon as he enters these rooms, they tell him to get naked. So whenever he goes into the new setup, they're like, take your clothes off. Over time, his appearance changed as well. And it wasn't just the weight loss, because he's basically starving. His nails also grew incredibly long, and so did his hair. He had no toothpaste or toilet paper for a long time, and when he finally won these in a prize, he was so excited. He literally was like, yay, now I get to brush my teeth. I feel so sorry for this guy. You can even see how his teeth changed from not being able to brush them. They're just like, the appearance of his teeth changed. He looked disheveled, but disheveled isn't even the right word. I feel like it's too mild. He looked unkempt, naked and unkempt. Brought to you by Discovery Channel. Lol, can you imagine? You're probably thinking, why would someone subject themselves to this? I mentioned before that he wasn't kidnapped and locked in a room, so he could escape, right? So why didn't he? He said that he didn't escape because he's a man of his word. And when he says he'll do something, he does it. And he sticks to that. And on top of that, he's naked. So he'd have to go outside naked and ask for help, which is what he says. And I feel like that's a big no-no anywhere. Like, imagine just a naked person walking down the street. Jump scare. He also explained that it's basically this is me paraphrasing, but what he explained was that it's ingrained in Japanese culture to basically stick to your commitments regardless of how easy or hard it is. So I guess you can say that he experienced this unspoken peer pressure because of the culture in Japan, where if you chicken out or something, then it kind of brings shame. And he didn't want to bring shame on himself or his family, even though his dad was probably like shaking his fucking head watching his naked son on television when he told him, don't get naked. He had one job. Eventually, he reached his goal of winning 1 million yen in prizes. And instead of telling him he won, the producers simply blindfolded him, put clothes on him, and took him away. They didn't even really tell him where he was going. And they didn't even let him wake up by himself before they did all of this. And this happened on more than one occasion. They'd sneak in the middle of the night while he was sleeping and wake him up by startling him with loud noises, like they're banging things and all of that sort of stuff. It seemed like wherever possible, they really opted to lean into the torture. So when they took him out of his apartment for the show, they took him to South Korea. And the excitement is palpable. He's overjoyed. Not only was he not in that dingy apartment anymore, but he's in Korea. He's in fucking Korea. It wasn't until he got there that the producers announced that he achieved the goal they set out for him in the beginning. That's when they tell him that his prize was the Korea trip. Basically, they were like, well done, bub. We've exploited you for almost a year, forcing you to eat dog food. But hey, we brought you to Korea. Have fun sightseeing and eating Korean barbecue. You're welcome. We did this for you, Nasubi. They didn't just take him to South Korea for funsies, though. That would be way too kind. After the end of what was probably the best fucking day of his life at that point, they take him back to this room that looks the exact same as his room in Japan. And they tell him, after they tell him to get naked, they tell him that he must enter sweepstakes to win the amount of money that would be equivalent to his plane ticket back home. And side note, the reason why they did this was because the show was so popular. At the end, it was him, the end was supposed to be him, you know, having his Korea trip, and, you know, he's going on fairground rides and he's just having fun. He's having Korean barbecue, and honestly, who's not happy when eating Korean barbecue? So that was supposed to be the end, and it was supposed to end like that, but because the show was so popular, they decided to prolong it to basically recreate the show in Korea. He didn't even speak any Korean, so they were kind enough, I guess, to give him a Korean to Japanese dictionary to help him to translate the magazines so that he could enter the prizes to win the money to get back home. Yet again, he was naked the entire time. He won no clothing items, and they never gave him a blanket or anything. When they told him what was happening, he looked incredibly despondent, and he said he felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under him, and that he didn't want to speak or do anything because he lost all energy. He even told the producer that he wouldn't do it, knowing how much it took out of him to do it the first time around, and he stood his ground for some time. But eventually he relented, and he said that the producer was really persuasive. It's also important to know that he's in a different country where he doesn't speak the language and he has no money. This is what I consider to be kidnapping. The first part was, you know, kind of dubious in terms of morality, but this is like, they kidnapped him. They're like, oh, they lured him away with candy on a stick, and then they took the candy away and beat him with the stick. That's what they did. Yes, he willingly got on the plane, but again, he had been locked in that room for a year by himself. His dignity was already out of the window, and in that situation, I'm sure you could have convinced him to do anything. There's actually studies that show that solitary confinement of 15 or more consecutive days causes irreparable damage and should be considered torture. And this man endured it for so much longer. Despite that though, he was actually really good and he achieved his goal in 4 months, which is almost nothing compared to how much time it took for him to complete it the first time around. This story gets even more despicable because halfway through, so I think the first time around, he completed it in like 2 months or something like that. So he achieved his goal. And I guess the show was so popular, they kept wanting to milk it for all it was worth. So instead of just letting him go home and get some fucking therapy, they changed the rules. So instead of making enough for a business class ticket, they told him that he had to make enough for a first class ticket instead. And again, when they tell him this, you can see the light drain out of his eyes, but he still did it. And again, instead of simply announcing to him that he won, they sneak in at night, startle him awake, and blindfold him. He gets dressed and he's taken to another bare room with the coffee table, similar to all the other rooms that he's been in up until this point. He immediately takes his clothes off as soon as the blindfold comes off and he realizes the room that he's in. They basically Pavlov's dogged him. They Pavlov dogged him out. Like, in simple terms, classical conditioning is a type of learning that happens subconsciously. When you learn through classical conditioning, an automatic conditioned response is paired with a stimulus, and this creates a behavior. So it's basically when you associate a certain action with a certain stimulus. So it's also like, oh, a bell rings and you associate that with, I don't know, someone telling you to fuck off. Like, why is that the example that came to mind? Anyways, that's what classical conditioning is. And whether they did it intentionally or not, that's what they did to Nasubi, because they kept, Tomoaki. Every time they changed his room and the room was the same bland brown room with the brown coffee table, they tell him to take his clothes off. So that's what he did. Up until that point, he'd been classically conditioned to take his clothes off as soon as he enters the empty room with the brown coffee table. Except this time, as he was sitting there waiting for the instructions, the walls break away and suddenly he's on stage in front of an audience full of people cheering and screaming at him. I'd like to remind you again, he's booty butt naked. He looks terrified. He doesn't know what's going on and you can't really blame him. He's like, what the fuck's going on? I haven't seen people for like a year and now these people are just screaming at me. What the hell? And also, I feel like being naked in a room full of strangers is a nightmare for anyone. But this was his reality. Then, so after he's like sitting there and people are screaming at him, two presenters come up and they explain that he'd won and he'd finally finished the challenge. They then explain to him that there was a secret camera in his apartment and that it'd been recording him non-stop for 24 hours straight. So the whole bit where he was made to keep changing the tape in a video camera, it was absolutely pointless. He was also told that he was on the cover of magazines. His highlights and lowlights were clipped and watched by millions of people. And why did I repeat that in my notes? And he was on the cover of I really wanted to emphasize that he was on the cover of magazines. He said that he was happy that the ordeal was over. And he was happy that it wasn't entirely for nothing. So that was his response to them telling him that he'd been like the most famous man in Japan this entire time. But he was still shocked by the response from the country. He was shocked that they were so enthralled by his suffering. Sadly, after the show, Tomoaki didn't even enjoy the glitzy life of a famous comedian he initially wanted. He did have his 15 minutes of fame where they'd invite him to go on different TV shows, and he was in, like, he did some acting as well for a bit, but it kind of faded out and he didn't actually get to live his dream. He was relegated to like being an amateur comedian. He also said that he had a lot of trouble socializing, and he said that it was really difficult for him to hold conversations and found clothes to be really scratchy and uncomfortable, even 6 months after everything had happened. He did spin it into a positive though, saying that although the experience was traumatizing, it was meditative and he learned a lot about himself. He does a lot of charity work in his local prefecture, which he's from Fukuoka, and that was impacted by the earthquakes and tsunamis that happened in 2011. And he did some acting and TV appearances as well. And he successfully scaled Mount Everest in 2016, which is no easy feat. Like, I couldn't do that shit. All in all, he seems to have made a nice life for himself in spite of the terrible experiences. And it's in spite of him not being able to fully realize his dreams. As for the producer who did all of this, he was well known in Japan for being the king of reality TV. So basically like an evil Andy Cohen, I guess. This piece of shit said that he wasn't even sorry for what he did to Tomoaki. And he even went as far as saying that he doesn't regret anything that he's done on any of the segments he produced, and he doesn't care about the people that he harmed along the way. Even after Tomoaki went to dinner with him afterwards and explained how painful the experiences were for him, he was still like, nah, I don't regret it. What a fucking sadist. In 2002, the show was cancelled due to low ratings, and it's not clear exactly why people stopped watching. Maybe they couldn't top the craziness that they subjected Tomoaki or Nasubi to, or it's possible that people just stopped tuning in because they didn't want to see people get tortured every week. It's hard to tell. This is just my opinion now. This is the conclusion. I feel like reality TV shows are where humanity goes to die. There's shows like Naked and Afraid, Fear Factor, which I used to love when I was younger. Watching it, the parts that I didn't really like were the bits with the bugs, like whenever they would submerge someone in a pit of bugs. I wasn't really here for that, but I used to love Fear Factor. Back before Joe Rogan went off the rails, I say. Anyways, I don't know what Joe Rogan was like back then. I don't even know what he's like now. And even I'm a Celebrity as well, here in the UK, where they get celebrities to eat kangaroo nuts and whatnot. Like, when I think of I'm a Celeb, I literally think of celebrities being forced to eat kangaroo testicles. I don't know why. Then you have shows where people are beating the shit out of each other, or where the aim is to find the most psychotic or sociopathic person ever. See Bad Girls Club, Big Brother, and even the Real Housewives franchise. Remember Nasty Nick on Big Brother? Like, he was sociopathic. Oh my gosh. And also Andrew Tate was on Big Brother as well, but he was kicked out for some reason. When I was younger, I used to love watching all of these shows that I mentioned. I've binged entire seasons of Real Housewives and Bad Girls Club before, but at some point I realized after watching them that my demeanor would change. I became more confrontational, and I'm not really a confrontational person at all. Like, if you nug, I will bark, but just like in general, I will never go seeking out a confrontation. But these shows made me want to fight and cuss people out because they're portraying this behavior in an entertaining way, and people are being rewarded with clout and, you know, fame and all of these things from behaving like that. The most aggressive contestants or cast members are sometimes the most popular and well regarded. So they're basically rewarding that bad behavior. In most cases, they showcase the absolute worst that society has to offer. On the other hand, there's shows like First Dates, which I absolutely adore. It's literally the only dating show that I will watch because they don't show people trying to one up each other or deceive one another in order to gain something. And unlike literally every other dating show, it's not a contest. And I really love that. It's so cute. I really love the old people on First Dates. I'm trying to wrap this up in a nice little bow, but this whole thing is a tragedy as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, it could have been so much worse. If anything, it shows how well adjusted and decent Tomoaki is as a person. I wish him nothing but the best in life. He deserves for his pillow to be cold at all times. First of all, he deserves a pillow and he deserves for it to be cold. And he deserves a blanket as well. I think a lot of people watch reality TV as a way to escape their own reality. There's probably even a bit of smugness involved. Kind of like, yeah, my life is shit, but look at so-and-so, they have it way worse kind of thing. And yes, reality TV does embellish a lot of things. I mentioned Real Housewives earlier. Some of the women on that show, in that franchise, are not as rich as they claim to be. Take Jen Shah, for example. She's from the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and she's currently in prison serving a 6-year sentence for wire fraud. And Teresa Giudice, I don't know how to say it, I'm really sorry, and her husband Joe both did time for financial crimes as well. On the show, they all portrayed themselves as living in the lap of luxury, and that was like, sometimes that was even their main storylines, when in reality they're basically defrauding old people in order to keep up appearances. Other times, reality show is exactly as it's portrayed. With that in mind, it's hard to say that you shouldn't believe what you see, because these things could be way different in actuality, which is another reason why I don't really fuck with reality shows like that. I don't have any words of wisdom to end on, so I guess I'll end with a question. If you were told you'd achieve fame and fortune and all you had to do was stay in a dinky little room and not talk to anyone for a year and some change, would you do it? Answer quickly, bitch. Answer quickly. I actually wouldn't. That's it. That's the end of the show. Well, that's it. I didn't have any words of wisdom to add. Like the whole, I feel so sorry for that guy. He seems to be doing well now, and I hope that he's in therapy. But solitary confinement can really mess you up, like long term, permanently. So I just hope he has like good people around him and that he's not still like isolating himself. But anyways, to end on a good note, Greece has made hundreds of beaches accessible to wheelchair users by installing self-operated ramps. As an able-bodied person, I must admit this is something that I have not thought a lot about. But accessing beaches can be near, if not impossible, for wheelchair users. Off the top of my head, some of the beaches that I've been to in the UK are not really that easy to access, and some of them you can't even really walk on them because they're made from pebbles. It seems like Greece has the answer to this problem. Plus, they have amazing beaches. I would argue that their beaches are even better than UK beaches. The Greek tourism authorities described having access to the sea as an inalienable human right. And as a result of this, they're installing self-operating wheelchair ramps on 287 beaches across the country. They've placed an emphasis on the ramps being self-operated because it means that wheelchair users can use them without any help, which means if you want to be a sad little emo like me and you want to have a little beach day by yourself, you can now do this if you're in a wheelchair without worrying about mobility or the goodwill of strangers to get you where you need to go. The tourism minister said, people with disabilities and people with limited mobility can engage in activities such as swimming that contribute to their physical and mental health. So far, they have covered 147 of the beaches, and there's plans to do the rest of them. The guy who helped develop this system, his name is Ignatius Fitu. I don't know why I made that sound kind of Italian. I'm so sorry. Ignatius. But am I gonna leave that in? We'll see. His name is Ignatius Fitu, and he said C-Track, which is the system that helps people get from the land to the beach. C-Track does not only provide independent access to the sea, it also provides dignity and independence to people with mobility issues that want to enjoy swimming. They can choose where to go and ask their friends to join them, not the other way around. That's so important. The Greek government also has a website where they have maps of all the beaches. And in my notes, I said they have maps of all the maps. So that's wonderful. So they have maps of all the beaches with the wheelchair ramps. And it seems like it's part of a bigger plan to make the country more wheelchair accessible, since they've installed lifts and ramps across famous historical attractions in the country. And as you know, Greece is old as fuck, and I guess they didn't have people in wheelchairs back in the day, like during the Greek times. Let me move on. Anyways, that's really great. I love that for them, and I wish more countries would do stuff like this, because like they said, everybody deserves to be able to access certain things, and my ignorant self didn't even think that it may be difficult for people with mobility issues to access the beach. Like it didn't even cross my mind. So that's really great that Greece is doing something about that. I'd love to go to Greece one day, Santorini specifically. I feel like everyone wants to go there, but hopefully it happens soon. So there you have it, folks. We've come to the end of another great episode. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new today. If your name is Tomoaki, what's his name? I already forgot his full name, so I'm not even going to say that. But I hope Tomoaki's having a great day. And I hope you, dear listener, are having a great day too. As always, please follow the show on all podcast platforms. Don't forget to rate and review. And most importantly, come back next week where I might be talking about random creepy men selling their baby batter on the internet. Tune in for that one. Also, don't forget to drink water, go outside, and most importantly, crush the enemy. Bye.